James Mitchell, he will ground us in what AI actually looks like in practice, focusing on things like safety, everyday tools, such as what we mean when you hear the word agents, or systems that can act, automate, and support decision making for community-based organizations and individuals, quite frankly. This session is designed to be a practical and accessible for community organizations and ecosystem partners. I am going to pass it over to James Mitchell to take us into AI in action. James.
One disclaimer, I like to use, the way I use AI may not be the way everyone else use AI. Um, but this is kind of an open session to kind of give you guys an understanding of what I'm using it for and how I'm using it, especially for my cybersecurity firm. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen right now. Everybody can see it? Great. For me, the bottom line is that AI is more of a tool for me, right? So I use it as a tool to help either my technicians, either beginning technicians or advanced technicians, to kind of how can I say this, to help them on their job role, right? So I don't really use AI to say I need AI to go research and do all this stuff out on the website where it could potentially harm and have some of my customers' data. So it isn't used like that for my space specifically. It's just used as a tool for triage. I use it for help desk. I have a help desk agent that I built specifically for the cybersecurity firm to be used to help my technicians solve calls. Can it solve calls? I can design it to solve calls, but do I want to? I don't think I want to. My plan is to keep a human in the loop, so it's not coded to machine learn. It's not coded for any of that. It's just coded to help my technicians to the next step. Um, Something about AI that a lot of people don't know, it's already in your work. Grant proposals is being used in surveying your grants. So a lot of people, when you use your grant proposals or you're filling out grants, if you use AI as a tool, it can help you put those words, those buzzwords that you need into your grant proposal. Candidate resumes, most jobs running through candidate resumes just to kind of give you what candidates work the best, um, for what you're looking for your culture, for the type of skill that you're looking for as well. Client benefits, AI is at the DMV, unemployment, they've been using it for a while now. Intake forms as well. Real fast, I'm going to introduce you to Stanley. He is AI agent that I built that I spoke briefly about. This is Stanley. It is coded with Python. It just sits in the background in RTS. It's not $75, but it was close to that. Um, but this agent is coded for read, source, prioritize drafts. Stanley doesn't touch any of the client data. So anything internally, it's been coded to just work off of RTS's SOPs. So anything that we design for SOP for a certain client, such as specific onboarding tools, offboarding tools, the laptops that they use, things of that nature, that's what it does. Um, it also does it responds just to um, emails for triage. For instance, if a client sends us an email and say, "Hey, I'm having a problem with a password," what what Stanley does in the background, it gives the steps of a password reset. It does not reset the password for him. The human, which is my technician, has to go in and proceed to the next step. So I didn't want to design it to actually learn on its own, to do anything on its own, because as you guys know, AI will start acting on its own. Um, and I have experienced it. For me, what I think about jobs is I do not think that it will get rid of jobs. I think for a session like this, for like community-based organizations, from my perspective, it's going to enhance the way that we train for jobs. So now instead of looking for a typical employee that just has help desk experience or just have like hardware experience, that's not what I'm looking for anymore. I need the type of technicians that's on your right, you see, to be able to review what the AI did to make sure it's doing it correctly. Train and tune in AI tools, so it has to they have to have some type of coding knowledge in Python, and they don't have to be a Python pro, but you have to be able to recognize the variables and functions, or bad code, or repetitive code. Um, so handling hard cases, AI escalates because it will escalate it up to us if it has any issues that it can't specifically react on or talk about. Triage, writing the policies to keep AI accountable and building trust with clients that AI can't. So those are things that human in the loop for RTS that I need my technicians to kind of still be able to solve and do. Um, so to me, like I said, I don't think that AI is going to take jobs out of help desk. It's just going to enhance, it should enhance the way that we're training for jobs. Each technician, Google IT support, and A plus. If you notice, a lot of their updates recently, they're infusing it with some type of AI knowledge, and those technicians need to be able to do that because in about 2 or 3 years, I'm going to need technicians to come in and update packages, right? Do version upgrades to make sure AI is functioning correctly on that first layer before it gets to the second and third layer. Client's data is the real stake for me. I try to minimize things at the boundary. So Stanley strips passwords, pins, credentials, or do anything before it does anything on the on verse for the API that's connected to it. Um, 7-day retention, no model training. Stanley use API and it's only stored for 7 days. It does not train any models, document it, or contractually anything binding. It sits behind two firewalls, actually, zero bound exposure. So it runs on this Raspberry Pi. Will this Raspberry Pi get to be too much for Stanley? Yes, I will eventually have to upgrade to a computer because this is not going to hold as much as I needed to hold, or do as much as I needed to do soon. Um, is no public IPs, no port forwarding, only outbound TLS connections. Um, Password. So the recent upgrade that I did was connected it to actually update passwords. So if a client reach out, it can update passwords, but it has to authenticate before it does it. And my technician has to go in for code word to authenticate it before it moves to the next step. For me, if you have an IT provider, a lot of questions I like to ask is, do you have staff trained on monitoring AI tools in your environment? And that's a big thing because a lot of people like to take company information and put it right on ChatGPT. And if they're not paying for it and they're using the free version, everybody on this call probably already know that if it's a free version, it's being used to train models, right? So you want to be careful with that. And their IT provider or their IT staff should be letting people know that. I think IT companies, IT staff, and companies in general should develop an AI policy. You should have some type of AI policy that your employees should know. I like to try to tell people to include in your disclaimer as well. It also it's just helpful for the employee to know when and where to use the AI. You can't put social securities in AI, people's real names. Like that's stuff that is you know illegal and it will jeopardize and expose your data. What's your policy when staff member pastes client's data in GPT? Again, go over some policies with your organizations. Just have an AI training, call company in. Companies will do it as well. Um, if you adopt the AI tool, how will you help us vet the vendor's data practices? Um, that's something that you actually have to do as well. So find which AI tool works best. It's a million AI tools. Some AI tools work best for companies, some don't. Um, and then who reviews the logs and how often and how often for AI related activity. That's another thing. So you want to make sure you get your logs reviewed by somebody or a team, IT team, regularly, just to make sure employees aren't exposing that data. Um, if you have a breach caused by AI tool, that's another part of disaster recovery or risk assessments, and all your gap analysis are related to that. Like you want to be able, you include AI practices inside of those risk assessments now. Um, are you intentionally are you using AI internally to handle data? If so, where and how? Again, that's another thing that you guys gotta, for me, from my perspective, that you gotta train staff. Staff training is probably the biggest thing for me, is showing them how to use AI, where to store AI, and what to do with it, and how to use AI properly. For you guys as a coalition, um, I do have some handouts, Chrissy. I can send you if people want them, to kind of share a vetting checklist that you know would be a suggestion. Fund AI oversight, upskilling now. For me, again, I think that a lot of grants should change. Like instead of teaching A plus, Network plus, Security plus, like you have to infuse some sort of AI training in that, because every tech company from MSP to cybersecurity are going to be using these tools, and now the technician needs to come with some type of language, preferably Python, some type of insight on these language and these packages and how to do them, right? That is, to me, I think that's the biggest thing in about 2 or 3 years, probably right now too. Like I said, I changed my whole um, interview process now. I need the technicians to come with some type of AI, not experience, but understanding, right? Know what it is, know how to recognize bad code, know how to update code. Python is big, right? So that's something that I need. Um, as a city, for me, my suggestion is advocate for funder AI line items. To me, I think it makes the most sense in all these grants that we're applying for. Um, I think it makes the most sense if AI is infused in almost everything. The training should change. It has to change. And last three questions to take back to your organization. One, who does this help? Who does this harm? And who's checking? Those are big questions involving AI for me. And Stanley again is trained on a local LLM. It's not really going out there doing anything on the web at all, guys. I'm using a Llama. So Llama is infused inside of AI using SOPs that we built over the years for 13 years. SOPs built. It is trained on that data. It's not machine learning. It's just responding on the data that it was provided to make it make sense, guys. So um, I think that is about it. I don't know if it's questions next. I'm sure it will be.
Well, we do have a few extra minutes before we dive into the panel discussion. Does anyone have any specific questions for James around his presentation, or a question that's popped in your head that he kind of got your mind going, and wanted to jump in and either ask a question or make a statement or concern, or um, converse specifically about this topic around practical hands-on experience? Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Thank you, James. I think one thing that stood out most to me that I didn't expect to hear is AI needs to be built into our grant proposals as community-based organizations, as that's really important to know. I'm curious, um, are you suggesting, like, is this a line item like with marketing? How we build in a marketing line item? How are you suggesting that? I'm so curious.
I think it should be infused in the training, right? So, like, if you guys are applying for grants, I don't really think that the funders will be the ones to do it. I think the people that's doing the training should be the ones infusing it in their training, right? Because like A plus, a regular A plus student coming here with A plus certification, right now that's fantastic, right? But it doesn't really help me on the other things I need help with, right? Coming in knowing hardware is great, but I need them to come in and to know a little bit about Python, how to update packages. If I send them out to update some packages, version upgrades, like I need them to be able to work on this tool as well as fix a computer, right? That could potentially happen as well. So I just think it makes the candidate more marketable, right? To me,
That makes sense. And would you also suggest, I hear that staff training, like internally, all the CBOs staff, and not just CBOs, but even the philanthropic organizations staff should be trained on AI. So I think you were suggesting also including training staff on AI as a line item in our grant proposals.
I think so too. But I think it's more AI safety for staff, right? Because there's a lot of staff that's exposing your data out on the web. I mean, out on AI, right? They're using the internal data with the HIPAA and PII laws, like you're using that stuff and to do emails, to draft emails, to send emails, but all that data is going inside that AI and being trained, especially if they're not paying for it or they don't have a some type of business associate agreement with that AI as a company.
I am going to pass it over to Dr. Sanders for our moderated panel discussion.
Welcome everybody who's on the call. Hopefully you got some good information out of James Mitchell's presentation, and you've seen some of the practical applications that AI can have, right? Some of the cool things that we can do with these tools, and but also be aware of some of the kind of red flags, the gotchas that you as community members, leaders in your organization, uh, members of the community at large to look out for. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that aspect now. And I have a couple questions for the panel. We'll kind of round robin it around. And then we're going to save about 10 minutes afterwards to open up the floor for questions. So if you have questions that pop up as you start to hear this conversation amongst these experts, please feel free to maybe drop them in the chat or write them down, and then we'll address those at the end. So my first question for all of our panelists here: what's one example of AI being used today that sounds helpful but could create harm if done poorly? Because we hear a lot about the good, the upside of AI, and you have all these because AI at this point is a product, right? So we have a lot of companies selling the good of the product. But what are some of those things that they're selling as good that might have potential drawbacks if we don't handle them the correct way? I'll kick it off, James, if you want to start us off, and then we'll go Dr. McCoy and then Shema.
Good question. For me, I would probably say something as minor as hmm, something as minor as it could be used for resume building, right? So like if 200 people put resumes in, it could eliminate the most experienced person off of something that it was trained against. Could be zip code, it could be name, it could be past history, even though they may have been the right fit for the job.
Dr. McCoy?
Hey, so I kind of want to start with the misnomer when we talk about AI, right? AI is an all-encompassing phrase. AI is just an underlying technology. What makes this different is the fact that it's generative, right? So when we think about the generative capabilities and how kind of they widespread, now everyone can use the technology. Some of the areas where it kind of raises concerns is when you think about kind of benefits navigation, when you think about like automated reporting, right? And is not that it fails, right? All technology fails to some degree, but it's that it fails confidently, right? So when you think about a system like navigating a system, a benefit system, or like navigating a process, right? The underlying system may tell you that you don't qualify, may tell
Mm.
you that you're not eligible, right? But it's the fact that it tells you you're not eligible that's confident in that kind of conclusion, right? And that's kind of one of the areas where we assume that it's doing good, right? But unfortunately, the underlying confidence and the fact that not everyone understands that these systems do hallucinate, these systems do make mistakes when we place that trust in it. So I think that that's one area where we think the system is operating as intended, but the system is operating as intended. It's operating to be confident.
Right. You brought up an excellent point there. And just for the audience, if you're not familiar with that term, hallucinations, this is exactly what Dr. McCoy is speaking to, this idea that if the AI can't find an accurate answer, it will make one up and it'll sell it to you as if it's the absolute
Yep.
truth.
Yep.
Shema, you want to jump in?
Yeah, in fact, I had the same thought, right? So the example that came to mind for me is content generation. I mean, everyone's using AI to generate content, whether it's papers, reports, law firms are using it for legal briefs that are going to the court. Companies and coalition and members of your coalition may be using it for marketing material, all kinds of stuff. It creates a lot of content and it creates really good content, generally speaking. But as everyone else has mentioned, it hallucinates and it can get it wrong. And it's surprising that there are still organizations today that are putting out content into the world that has not been reviewed, not been verified, and it creates all kinds of harm. So the hallucination part is one piece, and I think that's a really important piece. But the other piece I think is really important, particularly for our communities, is around skills, competencies. I think we are ceding too much to this technology. There are people who are no longer writing their own emails, which is fine, right? They're no longer doing their own research. They're no longer doing their own analysis. You can use these tools for that. But if you use it too much, you may lose you'll atrophy. You'll lose those competencies, those skills. You may lose your voice. You may lose the sort of the special thing that you bring to the work that you're delivering. And I think that's a real risk. I think what you're going to see is a flattening of content where everything begins to sound and look the same. I think you're going to find a workforce that has been sort of rationalized down to the mean. And when that happens, it's a lot easier to replace you because you're just like everyone else. So for our communities, the other side of the content generation, the dynamic is to be very mindful of whether or not you're still bringing something to the table that is unique and special and tied to the things that you've picked up and learned as an individual.
Absolutely. And in being in the education space myself, that's a conversation that we've been having a lot. When you have folks who haven't developed their skills, it's one thing for like a professional like you as a JD, Dr. McCoy, Mr. Mitchell, have these years and years of experience in your respective disciplines, utilizing AI as a tool to help accelerate your work. But that's different than a high school student who hasn't developed that muscle memory, hasn't developed those skill sets, leveraging this tool as a replacement for doing the hard work to actually build up that skill set. So
that's exactly right.
You raise an excellent point.
That's a great point. I think that also raises a challenge for all of our organizations in terms of how we train people, right? Because we want people who come in to use these tools, but we also want them to cut their teeth and know how to do the core skills. So how do you balance training and onboarding and acceleration of careers, particularly early, with the use of this technology? I think that's a problem we're going to have to solve.
And I think that's actually a good segue into our next question, which we actually can look at this question from two lenses. So the next question is, how do we ensure protections and accountability are built in from the start and not added on later? So we can look at that from two perspectives. Protections in terms of protections in the usage of the technology itself, but also protections of the people who are leveraging the technology. How can we, what are some strategies that you guys have in mind for how we could potentially ensure that we're putting these guardrails in place to protect the usage of the technology and protect the people who are leveraging the technology so they don't outsource themselves out of opportunities in the future?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. This is I'm thinking about Baltimore specifically here. I'm thinking about this coalition and the folks that you all are pulling in. I think we have to think about AI and the way in which we are adopting it as both obviously a technical and business and practical challenge, but also a political one, right? And thinking of ourselves as consumers and as citizens who still get to shape the way this technology is going to impact our communities, right? So I think one piece of it is consumer sentiment. Companies that are being responsible with this technology, that are developing it and deploying it in a way that has these guardrails, they should be rewarded with your dollars. For many of our organizations, you're not going to have enough leverage to change how Anthropic is deploying Claude, right? In terms of on the front end, right? So on the back end, if you want to put in controls, those are pretty much baked in. And you may not have a lot of leverage in your agreements with them, but you can decide to use them versus someone else because they have said that they're going to lead with security, they're going to lead with transparency, they're going to lead with compliance. So I think using citizen pressure, the coalitions, political clout and consumer clout to push for technologies and to support companies that are doing things the right way is one way to protect. And then the other is to start asking the critical questions about impact to our communities. And in here, I'm thinking about workplace displacement, for example. I agree with James Mitchell that we don't know if it's going to be 5%, 10%, 30%. I mean, the numbers are all over the place. But organizations like this have an opportunity to educate people who are really busy and don't have a lot of time to figure out how it's going to impact them, to make that information accessible, to organize around the things that are going to impact these communities, and then start advocating for policies and ways of bringing these technologies into our community that protect our members. But that's a thing that has to happen now, and that's more political in nature.
That can't be a band-aid later on.
No,
It'll be too
no,
late by then. Dr.
no.
McCoy, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, definitely a piggyback off that. I think that oftentimes we underestimate the true power that we have within purchasing, right? So when organizations are making these broad layoffs, right? They're making business decisions, but they assume that the consumer is too busy to actually care, right? But where local organizations can really have an impact is being thoughtful in their implementation, right? And being accountable to their partners and being advocates. We don't really kind of look at advocacy through this technology, through how we engage the technology in the community. But the way that this technology is actually shaping and impacting how organizations actually engage with the constituents or the people that they serve can be very much um, encompassed in the conversations that practitioners have with their constituents, right? Not only can we make the decision with purchasing power, but we can make the decision with how we advocate for the tools with our constituents, right? It's kind of something that, it's kind of something that we take for granted, but kind of this technology landscape is somewhere where advocacy is a purchase decision.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're seeing that play out in real time. You're having organizations. I don't know if you're familiar with the platforms like Duolingo. So I was following a story on Duolingo where they outsourced a lot of their customer support to AI, and they started to almost immediately get pushback and complaints from their consumers because one of the selling points of their platform was, hey, if I'm having trouble using your language learning app, or I need coaching or assistance, I can connect with a person that can help me. And the AI can't replace that same human interaction, but it took the consumers, it took their purchasing power to be able to really have a voice there to move it up the chain, to have the CEO of the company respond to it. Mr. Mitch, you want to hop in on that one?
Yeah, I love what James and Shema said. You guys are spot on. It's not really much to hop on with that. But I do think that the community and coalition in general should actually know when AI is being used. I do think that it's something that a lot of the public don't know. We have no clue when it's being used or anything. I think the public should know something about that. But they were pretty much spot on for what they said.
Awesome. But you raise a good point too. One of the benefits of having a coalition is that you can have a dedicated organization who can do those deep dives into things like, okay, yeah, we know people are using AI tools, but that looks different for different organizations, different community members. Who's responsible for figuring that out? Because right
Yeah.
now there's nobody responsible for figuring it out. So maybe that's a place where a coalition can run point, can take the lead the charge on helping differentiate in how AI is being leveraged within the communities that they serve.
Yeah.
Dr. Sanders,
Um,
I think that actually answers the question that's in the chat about how you prepare the public for the upcoming election with regards to AI. It's a lot of what you're saying, right? I think organizations like this do play an important role in helping sift through all the noise, right? The average person in Baltimore doesn't have time to synthesize all this information that's coming out about AI. And a lot of it is contradictory, a lot of it
mhm.
is false, a lot of it, right? So how do you use the reach that an organization like this has to reach out to professionals like yourself who actually understand the ecosystem to come up with materials, information that is accessible and directly targeted at the pain points that are tied to your community in Baltimore, right? Because not everything in the EA ecosystem is going to affect the people in Baltimore, but there are things that do. How do you sift through all the noise, all the stuff to get to what matters, frame it, and then organize and advocate around it? I think that's where a coalition like this and folks like people on this panel can help.
Yep. And another benefit of coalition too is the removal of intrinsic bias, right? Like I
Yeah.
said, you have AI is on everybody's lips right now, but probably 90% of that is because of marketing. This is a product that companies are trying to sell to us. So they have an intrinsic bias towards AI being the best, AI being the thing that everybody needs. Whereas a neutral organization like a BDEC or like a coalition can have that neutral voice to say, here are the pros, but also here are the cons. So let's move to the next question. What role should local institutions play in shaping responsible AI in Baltimore? And I think we've touched on that a little bit, but let's dig a little bit deeper in that one. Like role roles of a coalition, the roles of individual nonprofits or higher education. Think about it from your maybe your organization's perspectives. How could a local institution like yours play a role in shaping AI being responsibly used in Baltimore?
I can start. Shema made a good point, and Willie, you did too. Especially with having a coalition that companies can look to shape that, or to let them know the dangers or the safety surrounded with AI. I think that if the public or nonprofits or businesses knew of a specific organization that they can look to provide the vetting, the safety guardrails, all that stuff too. I think that would definitely be something that would be helpful to everybody.
Awesome.
Um, I,
Uh-huh.
I think one of the most critical roles that local organizations can play is really education right now. Like the technology has moved so incredibly fast that even from someone that's been kind of in the field for almost 10 plus years is really shocking to me, right? So to the random person walking around Baltimore, right, really doesn't understand how advanced this technology is, right? And it's encompassed upon the people in this room, the people that at least have some understanding of where the technology is, where the technology is going, to play that advocacy role to get people to really think about it. Because if it's not in the front of people's mind, right, they're not really understanding how it's truly shaping their world and truly
Mm.
shaping their outcome. And as it continues to advance, that's where the local organizations can do. You play an advocacy role, like you inform communities that don't really understand this technology. And the unfortunate thing is the technology is leaving a lot of these communities behind. And this is where kind of the work that we do at Reprieve is to just have some of these base level conversations, because without people that are attending this session, right, without us having these conversations and bringing this advocacy, local people around the city, they're unaware, right? And the technology is leaving them behind. And unfortunately, it's shaping and impacting our lives more than it's impacting everyone else's lives.
Mm.
And, and the piggyback on that, before I kick over to Shema, I think that you made a really good point, Dr. McCoy, that it's shaping not just lives of institutions, but of it's shaping the lives of people on an individual basis. And I think AI inherits that from technology from its parent technology in general. Uh, as someone who's out in the community a lot, I hear sometimes people say, "Oh, well, I don't really need to learn that tech because it doesn't affect me," because they don't see how that tech,
Mm.
even if not directly, is still having an impact on their lives. We're in that same boat right now with AI. might not think AI is affecting you or affecting your organization. Oh, we're just a nonprofit. AI is not going to have that big an impact on us. It already is. It has been maybe for the last 5 or 6 years, but it hasn't been revealed to you. So that you raise a really awesome point, Shema.
Yeah, I'm just nodding my head in agreement with everything that's been said. There's so many great points, but just to sort of tie it together with one more idea that I would add to the three really great ideas that all of you shared. A coalition like this, I think one of the things that you can do is empowerment. Empowerment, that sometimes gets thrown around as sort of, it's almost cliche, talk about coalition groups empowering members. But empowerment really matters here because I think there are a lot of people who are afraid of AI, right? They're intimidated by it. And I think we need to make it more accessible and more real in the lives of the people of Baltimore. I think there's also this sense that there's nothing we can do, right? That the ship has sailed and everything's already baked in, and there's no role that we have in shaping it. And I think everyone on this panel would agree this is still the ground floor. As much as has happened in the last few years, particularly with Gen AI, this is still the ground floor. There are still decisions to be made, and members of community can be part of making those decisions. And then, of course, how it's relevant to us so that we don't get left behind. To me, all of those things are empowerment questions, and coalitions like this, through messaging, through convening, can empower people in Baltimore so that they don't feel like they're passive participants in this rocket ship experiment that we're in right now. This is still very accessible. This is still shapeable, and we can empower people to realize that.
Absolutely. We can still shape it. And I think at the local institution level, you even have our organizations on a call and other members have an even bigger opportunity to shape how AI is being perceived in their specific lane, right? Because as we said previously, AI looks different for different organizations, for different user bases. So if your organization is helping people with housing, how can AI be leveraged as a good for that? But what are the red flags in the housing area or food distribution or technology training? Because it's going to have a different flavor of how it's impacting each one of these different disciplines, even each one of these different types of business or types of nonprofit organizations. So as you organization leaders, stakeholders learn how it impacts your organization, that empowers you to now be able to go back to your constituents and show them how in the thing that they came to you for, they can leverage this as a tool. And we all can kind of work together to close this digital, it ain't a divide no more. It's like a chasm. This digital chasm that AI is creating, we can close it up a little bit at a time by showing people how it can be leveraged in their very specific use case. All right, for our final question before we open up the floor to any additional questions that we haven't posed yet, because I know there's probably a lot buzzing right now. Keep dropping them in the chat. Uh, what is one thing organizations in this coalition should start, stop, or question right now when it comes to AI? You could do all three. You could do one thing that could start or stop or question. What's some immediate action items that coalition members can take in terms of AI?
So I'll jump in. I think one thing that a coalition like this should question is how you're going to thread the line or balance these dual roles. One is you got to promote this technology. This is incredibly useful to members of our community. There are all kinds of ways this enables small organizations, small businesses to leapfrog, to do things they couldn't have done before because of all the productivity and efficiency and the capability that this technology has. We've got to promote it and make sure people are using it in ways that are constructive for whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. At the same time, we've got to protect workers. We've got to think about harm and impact. We've got to think about how we use this responsibly. So it's balancing how we promote aggressively the use of this technology while at the same time doing all the important work to protect our communities from the negative effects that this technology could have. I think it's how you balance that this organization should be thinking about and questioning so that you can get that right. Because I think that's an important tension to navigate.
I think one of the things that we should start as an organization is just removing the stigma around AI, right? And kind of bring a lot of these conversations to the forefront. I think within kind of within conversations, a lot of people are using AI, right? Individuals, but like you're not bringing that productivity to the front, right? So start bringing those conversations around the use of AI. Then organizations should not only bring the conversation around the usefulness of AI, but start building formal policies with what's the right way to use AI within the organization, right? Because if you don't do that, you have people kind of doing it kind of in the corners, and then kind of bringing the outputs, but you don't have a formal or standard way to use it across the organization. And I think that one of the things that we should stop is just stop assuming that 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 all the technology is the same. Like one of the things that we talked about, like a lot of the ways that different companies, whether it's Google, Anthropic, OpenAI, uh, uh, Google, right? They have different approaches. So we need to stop assuming that they're all the same, and start actually listening to what they're actually saying. Because of course they're going to promote to you and market to you, and they want you to use their platform. But the thoughtfulness that they're taking into how they built these systems, right, is wildly different approaches. And I think that we have to be cognizant of that. We have to start making purchase decisions based upon that there's different outcomes with different technologies. So we can't treat them all the same, right? We have to start investing in where we see the most value. So if you see value in safety and safe deployment, then make that purchase decision as opposed to assuming that the chat the I'm not going to say a specific brand, whatever technology that instead of treating them all the same, right? They're not the same. They're advocating for different outcomes.
Oh man, Mr. McCoy, that's something that's a whole nother topic. But he is exactly correct on how they train these models, and you should definitely do research on which models makes the most sense because it's a real thing. Some of them are trained politically, some of them are trained in a lot of different ways that they will give you different outcomes. Um, for me, the start is for a coalition. I think you refer to just a coalition. I think the start is to start. Got to start at a place like who's going to start the coalition that's going to be helping other nonprofits or organizations train or give out information about AI. That's to me that would be a start. Like who's the AI coalition, right? Who do we go to when we have questions if we don't have a specific person trained in AI, right? And I think that would be a great start for AI. And anytime I hear the word question, I question everything with AI. AI is never correct. It's always wrong. I question it until it's absolutely correct because it's not 9 times out of 10 it's wrong until it's correct. But sometimes you have to train it on the data that you want it to spit out, right? So a lot of people ask a generalized question to AI, but that question hasn't had a prompt first. So it's hard for it to give you the exact answer that you're looking for. Um, so those are my starting questions. Stopping would always be um, but if you start somewhere, the stop will stop, right? So if you start and people are trained on what they need to be trained on as far as the safeties with AI, then they will stop using AI in the way it's not meant to be used for.
Dennis, can I add one more start just in the response to I
Good.
think a couple of the comments that are in the chat?
Hmm.
This is coming, I guess this is, kind of stereotypical of a lawyer to suggest this, but
Mm.
start reading the terms of use. Start reading the privacy policy of these companies. If there's ever a time to read those documents, it's now with these particular technologies because they will exploit your data. They will, right? So read the terms and conditions, read the privacy policies. They have to disclose them to you, but most people don't read them, and they matter for a lot of the concerns we just talked about.
Yeah, these AI models don't exist, especially the LLMs, the large language models, don't exist without all the free data that you've been giving them, and then they turn around and monetize it. The founder of OpenAI, which Chat GPT, Sam Altman, said in a conference that AI is going to be the new utility. People are going to basically pay for it like they pay for their water bill. So I've given you all of these millions of pieces of free information. You're going to turn right back around and sell it to me. But I guarantee that if we wear it through the terms and conditions, that was one of the conditions of using their platform without paying for it. Because if you're not paying for it, then you're the product.
Sir.
So let's go to the chat. So we got a couple of questions in here. And comments. Stop using free AI for org work. um, so I feel like I have a caveat for that. I can agree. If you're doing org work where you're putting personally identifiable information, PII, stuff like that, you want to either have your own local AI or you want to have a system where in the terms and conditions they say if you paid at this subscription tier, it's going to isolate your information a bit. But if you put it in that free Gemini, free Chat GPT, personally identifiable information, then yes, that is not a good look. But what about if you're doing something that's a little bit less? And I'll pitch this to the panel. How do you feel about using AI, free AI tools for non-sensitive things? What are you guys' takes on that? Because I think from my
Yeah.
perspective, if we paywall it, if we say, hey, if you're an organization, you got to be using a paid version. What about the little one person
Yeah.
organizations, the little small businesses that's trying to get a leg up? They want to 5 times, 10x their productivity, but they don't want to pay. They don't want to absorb that fee. Should we? Do they not use it for something that's not sensitive?
I think they should, right? I think, I sometimes will want to compare what the output would be across the three different LLMs. And what I do is I anonymize, right? I don't, there's no names, no personal data, right? You desensitize the content, but being able to access those LLMs at no cost or do comparisons across the different LLMs, you can do that. You just have to be more responsible. So definitely, I think for companies that or organizations that need to use the free models, you're just going to have to educate and train people so that they're not putting in stuff that's going to get them in trouble. But I think we should definitely take advantage of the fact that there are free services.
Yeah, because according to Sam Altman, they might not be free for
Yeah.
for much longer. Maybe like a utility. Let's see if we got some more questions. Um, there's a comment. I like the idea of sharing with organizations the safeguards that need to be in place when using AI and client data. That's from Melanie. So sharing those safeguards. So that actually brings up a good point, right? So maybe as a coalition, that can be one of the things that we do as these best practices emerge for different areas of business, areas of nonprofit work amongst our coalition members. Maybe we as a coalition can highlight some of those safeguards and how they apply to different sectors. We got another comment here. Speaking of the AI coalition, we have to make sure BDEC plays a role in the upcoming NSF AI Readiness Coordination Hub grant, if anybody has insight into the institutions applying. So that could potentially be an opportunity for us and a way to leverage the membership.
I think I
Yeah.
do want to comment on that. I know there's one hub per state, right? One AI hub per state. So I do know or I know at least like UBalt is looking at that. But in speaking with UBalt and Cali and Dr. Stansberry, it was very much we don't know how competitive we'll be because we are representing Baltimore rather than the University of Maryland's or the Morgan State's or thing that represent kind of at a state level. So I think I've only heard thus far about UBalt and potential University of Maryland. I don't know if anyone else has any insights on who's going for the the NSF AI Readiness Hub grant, but it is state-based. So those were just some thoughts I was chiming in on there. And I think BDEC we can all play a role in this. But
Mm-hmm.
are we too hyper local for a kind of state-based hub?
Well, maybe not maybe we don't look at it from the hub perspective, but being at the table, right? Because even though Baltimore City doesn't represent the state, it represent a big unique portion within the state. So we want to make sure that we could, as a coalition, we could use our collective power, because what we lack in maybe statewide reach, we have in spades in terms of coalition. We have one. I would jump out there to say we probably have one of the strongest digital equity coalitions in the state. So I think that we have a voice that needs to be heard at whoever table, whoever wins this grant. We should be in communication with them to be advocating for Baltimore City as they start to implement whatever it is that they're going to be implementing. Um, from SEMA, there are some key characteristics of AI: closed versus open, large versus small, local versus cloud. Want to talk about a couple of those distinctions, maybe give our coalition members a little bit of vocabulary. I think this might be our last question we could take, a little bit of vocabulary clarification, because we've said a couple times AI is like different. It's like a blanket term, but there's a lot of nuances there. Can we clear up some of these nuances real quick? What's open versus closed? What's large versus small? Local versus cloud?
I'll speak real fast on the local versus cloud. So for what I spoke about earlier, I said a question above from Chris about the llama train. So when Stanley is trained on local data, it means that the data is cleansed, and this is what the only data that my Stanley is able to comment on is just the local data that was built from my standard operating procedures, which means it's not going out in the web with anything that's external, right? So it's just replying on what I trained it to reply on. It's not doing anything else. Obviously, that is a whole technical conversation about what type of computer you need, down to the specs of the computer to be able to do that. But that's the only thing that it does. And that's versus local versus cloud, right? Local is more private. Cloud is a little bit not private, right? It's out on the web. So if you're doing something internally, and you train it on your own data, that it can be built to respond to just your own data.
I'll kind of piggyback off that. So a model being open source versus closed source, when you train a model, what you're actually doing is getting the weights of the model. So a model being open weight, that means that they open up the weight so you can download the actual weights, which is how you kind of get that prediction. A model being closed source, a lot of the US companies, when you look at Claude, Anthropic, they're closed source models, right? Which means you don't really get access to the weights, right? So as it relates to the actual value of a model is actually in the weights, right? A local versus cloud, it's just depending on how you deploy the model. So a model being deployed in the cloud is you're hitting an API, right? Then you're getting an inference or response relative to like local compute, where the model is just kind of running on your local kind of GPU resources. And kind of what James was talking about, like local retrieval, when models actually kind of make their predictions, essentially what it's doing is making a prediction based upon either all of the information that's been trained upon, right? Because it's just a predictive system, or is you're leveraging the semantic understanding of the model across local documents. So it's just using that same technical capabilities on a constrained knowledge set or knowledge base. So that was a very nerdy way of answering that question, but
All right. I think that we're at a little bit over time now, so I'm going to hand it back over to Chrissy. Thank you to my panelists. I know Shema just had to jump off at another meeting, but thank you to my panelists for this robust discussion. Hopefully, everybody learned something from it, got a lot of information. Dr. McCoy, Mr. Mitchell, you want to drop your LinkedIn or contact information in the chat so people can connect with you, learn more about your organizations, learn more about AI from you, or if a question pops up later on that they want to pick your brain about. If you're open to it, please drop your LinkedIn, your email address into the chat.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sanders. Thank you, Dr. McCoy, James Mitchell. Thank you so much. And to Shema, who jumped off. This has been a amazing and this was a discussion with a lot of information. I think we have all have a lot to process, and we look forward to continuing to bring the coalition, more information, more knowledge, more resources. And we will take everything into consideration that was shared in this chat today. If you have any additional concerns, questions, thoughts that we need to focus on as a coalition, please email us so that we can do that for future sessions. And if we need any collaborations, Vance, you've brought up some great need for collaborations. Please reach out to us, whether, whatever BDEC can do to support us individuals as members or as individuals. We're happy to do that as a coalition for the AI grant or otherwise. So appreciate you all. We do have some exciting things coming up, of course. June 13th, we have not forgotten about internet connectivity. We do have an ISP community town hall coming up on June 13th at Open Works from 10 to 12. That will be coming out shortly, a flyer for everyone to share with community members. These are for residents. This event is for residents who need affordable internet. So thank you all, and looking forward to seeing you all again soon. Have a good one.